Greetings. I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer, formerly of No Longer Quivering at Pathos for almost 10 years. Now I'm just doing my own thing. The most common question that I get is whenever I talk about Quiverful. And this is a question that I used to get all of the time back when I was writing for No Longer Quivering. This was the most common question, and so I have to answer it. The question was, what can we do to help Jill Rodrigues and her children, or to help Jill Rodrigues feed her children? That was something just so common that would come up. If you don't know who Jill Rodrigues is, I would recommend that you hit Reddit, Fundy Snark Uncensored. They cover her. Or you could see Fundy Fridays. That lady has a lot of great coverage of Jill Rodrigues and others. Or you could just go to No Longer Quivering and put Jill Rodrigues in the search bar and look, because we have covered her a number of times. Last summer, about this time, we covered her because her eldest daughter, Nuri, I can never remember how it's pronounced, senior brain, got married. And she married Anna Duggar's younger brother, who we all know, Nathan. Hey, Rita Roo, get your groceries on. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. Everybody always wants to know how to help. I mean, we saw that pathetic spread that was put on at the wedding. We've seen the pathetic spreads that Jill has put on, hey, Kentucky girl, on her social media, where she showed, I'm feeding 30,000 people with this teeny tiny little roast beef. She's done that all the time. And it's pretty obvious that what she does with her food and food money. When I was in Quiverful, I had a friend that was very much like Jill. She did not buy food. She just did not buy food for her house. She spent her money on antiques. She was an antique shopper, if there ever was one. And she was awesome at that. Her and I used to go antiquing frequently. And I loved her to death, but she would not feed her husband. And her children were grown and out of the house by that time. So that wasn't even a thing. With her, it was control and weight loss. She was a tiny, tiny little thing. And I've seen her go for days and not hardly eat. She also had a significant eating disorder. She had an eating disorder. I caught her at it when we were traveling one time. I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to go into what the eating disorder was. But it was pretty severe. And she would go flip-flop between gorging and starvation. And her husband would come eat at our house because we always had good food, even though I was basically spent many of my hours trying to sneak vegetables in the foods I was feeding my children. I'm notorious for doing that. Still to this day, I'm married to a guy who loves processed foods. I cannot eat processed foods. I get very ill if I eat more than just a little nibble here or there. So I try not to do the processed food thing. I let him have the processed food, even though I fought it for many years. I've just reached a point, it's like, he's going to be 70 soon. Who cares if he has a little bit of Jif peanut butter and he has his beloved Pringles? So anyway, long story short, I wanted to just talk about Jill a little bit because of the many social media things we've seen her post about food. Everybody always asks. I love food too much too. Cooking and preparing. I love feeding others. I love eating myself. Kentucky girl, that's how I am. But I'm Cajun. That's part of our culture. We eat, we feed other people, we cook well. We cook these huge feasts. Let me tell you something. A feast at my house is more food than you could eat, except maybe here. I kind of keep it on the DL here. Don't make as much because I don't want to see my husband get, or myself, getting larger, and COVID has not helped. I don't know about you guys, but COVID has been comfort food city here, and that has not been. And then when I went on my lyric, I gained 15 pounds. So there's that. Well, Oh, well, hallelujah anyway. So anyway, the thing with Jill is I've been asked this question again and again and again and again about how do we help Jill? How do we help Jill feed her children? I think she's like my friend was, that she probably is restricting food to try and keep everybody skinny. My friend used to do that to her daughters, and it didn't work out very well. But this was well before I knew her. I didn't know that, but I heard later she would not eat to keep herself thin because she had been somewhat fluffy when she married her husband. Her husband would come eat at our house. It was pretty obvious what was going on, that she had pretty big issues around food. Now, Jill sells Plexus. Plexus is a weight loss thing. They have all these different supplements and things that the FDA has had some very nasty things to say about. They've said that one of the ingredients is a metabolite of methamphetamine. There's other things. It's hard on your kidneys. There are a lot of reasons not to do that. I've always found with food, the middle way is the best. You should really just be conscious of what you're eating, be conscious of how much you're moving, and don't worry so much about what you're eating. Just try to be more balanced in everything you do. But Jill relentlessly sells Plexus. I've seen her go skinny fat herself. Maybe I shouldn't use the word fat. Maybe plump, skinny, plump, skinny, plump. I've seen her do that. Here where I live, nobody sugarcoats anything, and they say muy gordo, fat. So the thing with Jill, she takes a Plexus to remain thin. Her husband is rather fluffy. I think he probably eats pretty well. But the poor kids have sunken eyes. They have a sallow skin color that's just not natural or normal. We see dark circles in their eyes. We see unhealthy looking bodies. We see little girls' arms that you can put your fingers around. So it's not hard to make that leap to think perhaps she's not feeding those children. Oh, we really have to go back and talk about the history of Jill a little bit before we talk about what to do about all of this. Jill used to live in upstate New York with David. David's a lot older than her. I do not know why they left upstate New York. They left some time ago for West Virginia. She was homeschooling. I've always felt that some of these fundamentalist families, like my friend, homeschool to hide the deprivation, the neglect, and even the abuse going on with the kids. They homeschool so they don't have to be held accountable for any of that. If your child is going to public school, at least they're going to be getting free breakfast, free lunch. They're going to be getting all of that. And where I lived in Virginia, there was a program that I absolutely adored where they would come out to areas that had been identified as areas where there were low-income families, where the children were on food stamps and free lunches. And they would show up in the summertime with snacks, with breakfast, lunch. They'd send the kids home with backpacks full of stuff to eat at night. And I was all about that. People can't help it if they don't have a lot of money, that they can't feed their kids properly. If you're really in that sad a shape, there are financial backups you can do. There's WIC, there's food stamps, there's pantries and food closets. They had a huge one in Richmond we would go to sometimes to pick up food to distribute in these poor neighborhoods. There was one in our little town. So there are other options, but the thing is, so many people I know in the religious families, hey, Star Lily, 2 weeks, every other, you're going to have your hands full then. You're going to have your hands full. Yes, Aaron, I am going to be talking about this. Oh, get on the train and it's spotty there. Well, you'll have to catch the replay. So there's all these different helps if you don't have enough money to buy food for your children that are more obvious when you have your child in public school, private school, some kind of cooperative than there are when you're just doing your homeschooling. When the Rods moved to West Virginia, they were moving to an area that's extremely poor. I love West Virginia. It is a beautiful state, some of the most beautiful natural things I've ever seen. But I have to tell you, it is a heartbreaking state. If you have ever driven through Welch, West Virginia, McDowell County, it is some of the poorest areas in the world. I have not seen that kind of poverty here except in Nicaragua. I mean, we're talking people living in chicken coops. See people living in sheds that are tumbling down around their ears. Just complete and total poverty, and the entire business sections of these little towns just shut down. Because once upon a time, West Virginia was a very wealthy, like one of the most wealthy communities in the entire United States when coal was king, anywhere from like the 1900s to maybe 1930s. Very wealthy neighborhoods. Because you can see that. You can see the tumbling down Victorian homes that you can just look at and see once upon a time they were someone's beloved mini mansion. Now they're just peeling, crumbling remnants. It breaks my heart every time I go, but we used to go, like one time we went to see the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. That was interesting. Flindration Tunnel. Those things, yeah, school is the thing. School catches a lot of these kids. You're right, Amanda, once coal mining went belly up, these people had no way to earn a living, and there's still no way to earn a living there. I would like to see some type of program set up there to help the people train for jobs in a modern world, maybe some type of computer, IT, something like that. I've seen some programs about it. I just don't think they've done enough. When one industry dies and the entire area is dependent upon it, they have to replace that with something. To me, that's the role of the federal government, is to come in and help when these disasters happen. Because parts of West Virginia really look like a disaster has happened, like a tsunami has come through and killed everything. That's what they remind me of. They remind me of these places where these horrible, horrible natural disasters have happened and people are just scraping by. So they moved from upstate New York, which is a pretty decent area as far as incomes and lifestyles and stuff, to West Virginia, where that's not even a thing, to start a church there. Well, I don't know if they started a church or they took over one, but they started their printing ministry there, printing out all these pamphlets, all these little tracts at cost for people, or barely above cost. David apparently, I don't know if he actually pastored a church there or not, but they built a house, bought a house, something like that, and they lived there and homeschooled their children. Now, much has been said in Reddit, both Fundy Snark and Fundy Snark Uncensored, about the Rodrigues moving from West Virginia to Ohio to avoid social services. And there may be some truth to that, because the Rods did leave West Virginia after there'd been numerous calls to CPS about them. And West Virginia had a law that they were looking at passing that would make it not possible to homeschool your children if there'd been a CPS complaint. If there had been a CPS complaint and they came out and investigated, at that point you would be required to move your child or children to public school where they could be monitored to make sure there was no abuse going on in the home. Now, school, that's another responsibility that's been laid on public school, is to assure the safety of the children. They've always had an eye towards that. Teachers, educators, nurses, everyone working in the school has always been a mandatory reporter. But now it's even more important. I like that law too. Yeah, so they are kind of grifters because they spend part of the year traveling around this old Winnebago type vehicle, going from church to church to church to church, begging for funds, playing their instruments, singing, and passing for love offerings. That's what they do for half the year. And how that impacts the kids' schooling and them eating, I do not know. I cannot even make but I don't think it would say anything positive about a child's schooling, because schooling has to be consistent, right? Even if they're cramming, even if they're claiming, like I've seen so many homeschoolers claim, that because they're not having to deal with discipline problems, are cramming on all their solids in a fewer hours. There may be truth to that. I don't know. I've known homeschoolers that did an outstanding job. I have several girlfriends who have managed to get their kids into UVA at 16 and other almost impossible type goals because they did a good job. But almost to a woman, each one of my friends that did an outstanding job had a college education. Everybody I know that did not, mixed results. I'm just going to say that. Some did good, some didn't do so well. So the rod's up and moved, and everybody speculated it is because that possible passing of that law. Ohio has a lot looser laws on homeschooling and CPS. The whole idea of helping the rods is something that Cindy Kunzman and I have talked to death. We have talked about this over the phone 10,000 times. Particularly as you could see Sophia and some of the other children getting thinner and weaker looking. We've talked about it. We've brainstormed. We've tried to figure out how to best do this, because we thought at one point we would just anonymously order them food, a package of food from Costco, have it delivered to their house or from Amazon, whatever. And we decided no, because there's been evidence that people have given the rods some type of food in the past, and she's either used it for a charitable event or given it away. So we kind of thought maybe we would be throwing our money away if we did that. We decided not to do that. I completely agree. I homeschooled 9 children. Wow, you deserve a medal for that. I think an important part of education is learning to be out in the world, but you have to have structure and consistency in spending time in your studies. You were right, Kentucky girl. I don't have anything against homeschooling. I do have something against homeschooling to hide stuff. They're undereducated. I'm sure they're undereducated, and it is a disservice to their children. They don't even teach them other skills like the Duggars and the Bates. Nori looks so much better now that she's out of the home. Absolutely, Amanda. I totally agree with that. So Cindy, if you don't know her, writes under much grace. Cindy is an awesome human being that has done a lot of good, deconstructing, leaving quiverful. I adore Cindy. I'm happy to count her as a real life friend, not just an internet friend, but somebody I would go hang out with for weeks at a time if I could. And I have gone and hung out with her before. So we've talked about this. And so we thought at first we'd send food. Then we thought, no, we can't do that because we've seen what Jill does. The other thing that we thought of was to send gift cards for various restaurants. And we thought, no, we can't do that because we've seen David and her go out to eat and not bring the children. We've also seen times they've taken the children out to eat and they've made them split an entree 3 or 4 ways or fed them nothing or very little. So I think that sending that kind of money, those things, if you sent money, God knows what she would buy. Maybe makeup, more plexus, which she does give to the children too. And she takes it when she's pregnant, which the FDA has warned is definitely not a good thing to do. So she would probably just spend it. Cindy did something that, hey, Cheryl. Yes, Amanda, they have employable skills, at least more employable than the rods. I mean, we're going to talk about Timothy in a few minutes. So that's why I would not send food. I would not send money. I would not send gift cards to restaurants because of the fact that we've seen how she acts about those things. We see what happens, how she gives them away. turns them into giveaways for different church functions. So there's that. Cindy thought she would talk to the health department because back when the pandemic first started getting bad in the US, Jill loaded everybody up into the magic van and took them to Pennsylvania and to other states right there around Ohio. They went around and did a lot of women's retreats. They spoke, they sang, and all the retreats that they functioned at, they were COVID hotspots. They spread COVID. And I want to say that I read that the Rods had COVID early on. And that may well be. I seem to remember that. But they were out spreading this hither and yon. Cindy called the health department in the county they live in to say, hey, these people are openly violating the stay-at-home orders in Ohio. The health department came up and said, well, it's bad. We think it's bad. We know it's wrong, but we cannot go after them for traipsing around Pennsylvania or wherever, and we'd have to almost catch them at it. So I'm just going to say this. We just need to keep our eyes peeled on this. Hope that if we talk about it enough, people in their real lives who know them will call CPS and hold them accountable if what's going on, if Jill is not feeding those kids, if that's what's going on. And without us actually being in the household, it's going to be really hard to prove that. Whereas those people around them in their little church groups would have way more opportunity to see that. I wish she would spend on anything. I wish she would not spend anything on anything. I wish the same thing. I wish she'd feed her kids first before buying makeup, before buying Plexus, before any of that. She really needs to. Laura, that's true. It is a redeeming feature of Duggar and Bates. I don't think that that was something that they came to right away. I think that as their children aged out and it was obvious they were having some difficulties finding that little niche where they could support themselves. I mean, look at Josh. He's a used car salesman. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I sold cars myself for a while when I couldn't get a job, and it's quite the task. And selling cars, I don't know about in Arkansas. I cannot speak to that. But in Virginia, you had to be able to pass a test to get a state license to do it. And it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world. You had to go through like 3 or 4 weeks of training to reach that point. So there's that. That is another way that I think the Rodriguezes have seriously failed their children. If we look at the history of Timothy Rodrigues, that we can see that they have failed him drastically. Why do I say that? Well, it's pretty obvious. Timothy wanted to be he wanted to pilot aircraft so he could fly people to mission trips and Bible drops and all sorts of things all over the world. Not a bad thing to want. It's important to have goals in life and to work to those goals. It gives every day a little more meaning if you have goals in your life. So anyway, he had his goal. He was going to do this, and he'd settled on Moody Bible's pilot program they had. They have a university program that is 4 years, just like a regular college, where you have to study things that you would need to know to be even an airline pilot. You would have to know physics. There's so many different things, different kinds of maths, so many different things that you would need to know. And he only stayed a year, 2 semesters. Jill said repeatedly on her Facebook and her Twitter that he left Moody Bible College because they had been misled about how much it would cost. And there was no way for him to work and earn that there. So she kept going after Moody Bible. to the point where Moody Bible and some of his fellow students all started dropping links to Moody Bible's webpage where they broke down the costs year by year, dollar by dollar for instructional time in the cockpit, supplies that would needed, all sorts of things. And it was right there in black and white. And Jill, of course, ignored that and pretended he was leaving because they had been deceptive about the cost of tuition when they had been totally upfront. I don't know if she ignored it. I don't know where her brain went with that. Oh, I think they should be teaching daily living skills too for their kids. Taught the roommates how to do laundry, iron, and do basic cleaning. That's good. My son, I tried to teach my kids that, and it only really kicked into high gear when they went to college because they had to do that. They could not call mama and say, how do I get this stain out? Or how do I clean the rug? My son called me in a panic one day because he'd spilled an entire bottle, Costco bottle, of Frank's hot sauce onto the rug and wanted to know, how do I get this out? It was kind of funny because he was in a dorm that had been condemned. It was scheduled to be torn down. So it might not have mattered if he got the Franks out of the rug, but he did anyway. So there's that. Teaching those skills is important. So Timothy came home. He came home for the summer and then he tried again. He went to a community college in Wisconsin. I can't remember if it was a regular Christian college or if it was just a regular college, but it was a college that would teach you how to fly, aviation thing. And it was a lot less expensive. It was in Wisconsin. He went there again. He went there until COVID struck. So he didn't even give a full year of instruction in. And it has been said that he flunked out. I don't know how true that is. I didn't see his report cards or anything of that nature. But he didn't go back. And someone posted on Reddit, a lady posted on Reddit a ton of pictures of her with him, claiming that they had been engaged. And there was some activity on his social media that pretty much confirmed her story that they had been engaged and he'd bought her an engagement ring at a local pawn shop. And David and Jill showed up and ended it and drug him home. The very beginning, the beginning of the COVID thing, like January or something like that, and ended that. He hasn't been back to school since. He's living at home. He has his lawn service stuff he does. He was working, I don't know if he's still working that, as a CSA at a nursing home. Oh, a nursing home and a home for a while he was working at that was for disabled adults, like mentally deficient adults, mentally challenged adults. It's hard sometimes because I'm old. Remember, we don't say these things. We have to come up with a better way to say them. But he was working there, but he was posting pictures from there. So I've got to assume they finally canned him because you can't be posting unflattering pictures of the people you're supposed to be taking care of. And he most definitely did that on his social media for a while. But I don't know if he's working as a certified nursing assistant anymore. Who knows? College students shouldn't be so lost. I agree. One roommate said her dad would pay a cleaning service for a dorm room. Cheryl, that's actually kind of funny, but terrible at the same time. But I've seen some similar things happen. I know that where my kids went to school, George Mason University, that was actually an option. You could pay to have somebody clean your dorm room. My son and his roommates did not do that because they were living in the condemned dorms. They weren't living in the brand spanking new ones. And by the time he finished up his degree and left, they finally eventually did tear those dorms down, but they used them for a lot longer than they were supposed to, probably 3 or 4 years. My daughter was more independent than him. She never lived in the dorms. She lived with her friends in a townhouse for a long time until her degrees were out of the way. You have to be able to navigate your life as an adult once you leave house to go to college. And the best thing you can do is teach your kids how to deal on a regular with the regular real world, everything from balancing a checkbook to figuring out a budget, all of that, plus how to clean and do laundry. Posting photos like that must break a ton of rules. Yes, Cheryl, they do. Not the least of which are HIPAA regulations. Those are the strictest thing ever in clinics, nursing homes, hospitals, so many different types of facilities. Yet they get broken a lot when you get some immature people in there working these jobs that turn around and take pictures to post on social media. Cheryl, you're right about that too. Some parents do not have those skills. My friend that I mentioned that would not cook and buy food, she herself was lacking in a lot of practical skills because she had been raised in an extreme fundamentalist, quiverful household. There were so many things that she missed herself that she had to pick up later and could only do imperfectly. One of the biggest things that she had to struggle with was how to get along with her husband. She wanted to control him, to have him do everything her way or the highway. And that created a lot of problems between the two of them. So many. So Timothy never went back. And Timothy is now living in one of the travel homes that the family has on the property. I don't think he's traveling much with them for their mission trips where they go out and speak and sing at different churches. I've seen pictures of him at one or two of them, but the most of them he seems to be at home taking care of the dogs, cats, or whatever animals they have. And I think Jill also is a victim of that because when I was talking about my friend, Jill herself was raised in a quiverful, extreme fundamentalist background like my friend. And whereas my friend read a lot of books and picked up how to garden and always do these things that she thinks she didn't learn, I'm watching Jill struggle with these things right now. Just go look at her gardening. That poor girl's making a ton of mistakes. I'm looking at her gardening thinking she ain't getting nothing out of that. Gardening is a skill that takes time. I have a lot of books that I've consulted myself, even though I grew up with a father who always gardened. Knowledge is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I know they seem to think in those families that knowledge is a bad thing. Taught my Cub Scouts to sew on patches because one came with glued on patches. Others were done by seamstresses. Hey, Real, I see you in there. Yeah. No answers from Give Them the Tea. You're right. I haven't seen anything yet either. I'm going to write myself a note reminding me to go look at that. Okay, and that's how I keep myself occupied because my brain is like a sieve ever since I went on Lyrica, so I have to take copious notes to keep myself on track. I don't know how I'm talking about this so long today without getting off track, but So here we are. We're just at the end. I can't figure out how to help Jill best. I think the best thing we can do is watch, pray if you're a praying person. If you're not, think whatever you want to think towards them, and hope that there are real people in their lives that will call social services, will be able to make those social service calls and say, hey, I know this lady. She's not feeding her kids. And this may be how Jill grew up. I don't know. Like I said, I saw my friends struggle with all kinds of things. I'm watching Jill struggling with some aspects of adulthood that make me believe that she didn't learn those things growing up. I will be forever grateful to my late father because he did teach me a lot of things that I have been able to use, including surfing, even though I can't use surf anymore. I have no balance. If I don't have the balance to stand, there's no way I can surf. Even though I did see something recently that I was like, ooh, I want. It was a surfboard with, I called it a walker surfboard because you could hang on to the handle. So that was pretty interesting. How that works, I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up. And I did see something I want to try the next time I go to Lake Arenal. It was also like a surfboard, the handles you could hang on to, but it had foot pedals. So you're on this big surfboard, you're hanging on for balance, and you're just foot pedaling like you're pushing a bike. And it just looked like so much fun. I can't wait to go out on the water there. I can't wait for the rest of the COVID restrictions to lift so we can go out and do some things. I can't imagine not feeding children either. Even if you don't have money. And I can relate to that because when I was in college as a single mother and I didn't have a lot of funds, there were times when I had to very carefully plan what I was going to feed my daughter. And there were actually times when I did without things. I did without things to make sure she had clothing, food, we had a roof over our heads, paid the electric bill, those sort of things. I used to talk about the panic of trying to decide, do I pay the electric bill or do I buy my textbooks? There were times like that. And there were times I worked 3 jobs trying to keep my head above water. It was a rough time. I can relate to anybody who's having a rough financial time because it's just not easy. And I think that things have gotten worse for a lot of people in the US now. COVID didn't help anywhere. Here we're seeing a lot more poverty than ever before. And Cheryl, I've seen that too. I've seen parents that will feed their children and go without themselves. And I have nothing but love for that because that's a tough thing to do, but it's something that a good parent will do. A good parent will go without when their child needs something desperately like food. So there we are. There's no helping. There's no helping. I mean, unless we all came up with a ton of money and paid for a deconversion like they do to people who are part of the Moonies or whatever. And I don't see that even working. She was raised from cradle to probably grave in this. And I don't think she'll ever give up her belief in that system. And that's really tragic. When you put theology above your family, and I'm not talking about God, I'm talking about theology. If you put theology above your family, you're really doing it wrong. I mean, it even says in the Bible that a righteous man takes care of his family first. It says it. You can't make this stuff up. So there you go. I was kind of almost hoping that they would get a little bit of time on the Duggar show when Nuri got married and Anna Duggar was a bridesmaid and Josh was there and he was being the MC at the reception. Unfortunately, I had heard that Jill was over the moon and she said that TLC was coming to film the wedding. Apparently that must have just gone by the wayside. Maybe TLC realized how incredibly abusive, neglectful the lifestyle that she and her family, their version of Quiverful actually is. Poverty is going to continue to grow. I'm afraid you were right, Kentucky girl. Many are going to be homeless and hungry over the next decade. We all need to be helping out our neighbors. You were right. That was one of the things I used to get questions about when I was Quiverful from some of my friends who were buying these flood buckets of supplies from Jim Baker and others, dehydrated food, all this like, it's the end of the world as we know it things, because they were buying into the world. They were buying into the whole eschatology thing, which I always thought was ridiculous because it actually says in the Bible, no one will know the day or the time. And they would spend thousands of dollars on this stuff to the detriment of their families and other things that would go by the wayside. And so they were spending all this money on this nonsense, and I totally forgot where I was going with it. Oh, they said, well, what are you going to do when the end of the world comes? And I said, well, first of all, I'm going to feed everybody that I could possibly feed from my Costco hoard, because my pantry was always full of Costco stuff, and I always made sure of that for a couple of reasons. Once my kids left the house, once they became adults, even through me leaving, if somebody showed up and started raiding the canned goods and raiding my home canned things, saying, "Okay, I'm taking zucchini relish and tomato sauce and this and the other thing," say, "Go right ahead." And that was always my plan. Whereas I knew people that were buying weapons along with their dehydrated food and talking about how they were going to be holding off all the starving people, which isn't even Christian, off of their dehydrated foods. And I actually told a girlfriend of mine, I said, "Sweetheart, when this happens, what you're saying, if it happens at all, if it happens, it's not going to be you with your little pretty pink pistol keeping people away from your dried navy bean soup from Jim Baker. It's going to be armed biker gangs with flamethrowers and bazookas squabbling over a squirrel carcass." Amanda, you did that too? Yeah, ugh with Jim Baker. You were exactly right. Ugh. And I remember my girlfriend telling me, "Oh, he's changed, because he got out of jail and he got him his new wife. He's changed. He's just found a new con. He's found a new con. He's got his silver solution he sells that has been proven to be toxic, heavy metal toxicity, and he sells this dehydrated food stuff. He sells it. He doesn't even make it. He's buying it from somebody else and selling it and doing markup on it, selling it to his fearful hordes. That is one thing that evangelical Christianity does well. It's fear. If they can keep you in fear, they can stop you from thinking. And if they can stop you from thinking, you'll accept any lie as the truth. And it never works out well. Never works out well. Anyway, I've been on here 42 minutes. Almost a new record for me. His scams change. You're exactly right, Cheryl. Baker did not change at all. He just changed his scams. And we are told to fear not. There's reasons not to fear, yet they work fear like it was their most, like if I had one of those buttons from, was it Staples? They had the big buttons that said easy and you press it and it says easy. That's like it, but it should say fear. And they go to that button and they push it again and again and again in order to control people, because it really is all about controlling their people. And that's really sad and sick. It really is. So go out and eat something good today. I haven't eaten yet. I'm going to look for something good in a few minutes. I think I still have some meatballs. Okay, you guys, have a great day. Have a wonderful Saturday. Be blessed.